Hello and welcome to another episode of The Swing. As always, it's your boy HK, and I'm joined by my co-host Owais as we go live twice every week to be able to break down what's going on in the NBA world. Obviously, we had a very special episode last week in which we broke down, as it happened, the trade deadline. Had a number of moves,
crazy episode,
a number of sad goodbyes that are especially affecting the Toronto Raptors, and we are going to talk about that and just the Toronto Raptors as a whole today. I know we've been spending a little bit of time as of late really breaking down some of the other stories in the NBA world, some of the upstart teams, some of the teams that are starting to now find their groove, but can't go any further than home to talk about a team that really needs to find its groove, to find its footing in what has been a tumultuous season. But before we go ahead and do that, as always, want to talk quickly about Thrive Fantasy, which is our sponsor alongside SportsTrends, where you can win daily money every night entering contests, daily fantasy sports props. Very simple. You go on, you join a contest for the night, and then you'll have an option of about 10 to 15 players, of which you have to pick 10 of just over and under on whatever stat is going on there. So if you think LeBron, as an example, is going to score, say, 28 points on the night, then you would go ahead and pick the over on that one. And as a special bonus for being a listener on The Swing, if you use the promo code SWING when you make your first deposit, you will get your initial deposit up to $50 matched 100%. So you straight up double your deposit money by being...
We like doubling, yeah.
Definitely get on. Promo code SWING, SWING. Sign up and prop up today. But wait, speaking of propping up, who's propping you up after that unfortunate, well, not even unfortunate, just the really sad end to a certain fan favorite's tenure as a Toronto Raptor? Norman Powell, no longer a Toronto Raptor. How do you feel about that, man?
You know, I mean, given the almost circumstances of what's happened during the season, honestly, it doesn't affect me as crazily as I would have thought, because I actually wanted him to be in a better situation. I mean, this guy deserves to get paid. We understand that. And as a Raptor, I mean, we can be selfish and want, you know, the most successful guy this season, arguably, to remain on the team. But in reality, we picked up some great pieces, some future pieces that will solidify into this, you know, already existing culture that we have here in Toronto, and will help us in that 2-3 year gap that we were talking about. But as for Norman Powell himself, like, I don't know words can't describe what he meant to the Toronto fan base, just because of the incredible, like, you know, playoff Paul, he tried to make it a thing, but really it was playoff Powell that started it all. Okay. And he did it he stamped his playoff Powell situation against Indiana, where he stole the ball off playoff P and dunked it, which seemed like he was in the air for years. It almost was MJ-esque in the Toon Squad, Space Jam style. And, you know, that Game 5 was monumental and an incredible playoff season for the Toronto Raptors.
Absolutely.
So Norman means everything: loyalty, hard work. You know, he brands himself as understand the grind, right? He loved playing with DeMar DeRozan. And, you know, I think you were the one who posted it in the group that we have, but there was a Players Tribune note and letter that Norm had to Toronto in general. And you could really feel the emotions. Yeah. And it was tough reading it, because I actually, to give you a story, I was working and I was like, you know, taking a little break. 2 minutes into the thing, I'm like, I don't know if I could finish this yet. I don't know if I can do it, because he broke it down into like almost like a 4 or 5 part little blurbs. But what do you think? Like, what did Norman Powell mean to you, and how do you feel?
Man, I mean, look, obviously we've been on this. We've talked about this for a long time. And I mean, as much of a fan favorite as Norman Powell was, For me, it was a completely different level of that. I mean, Norm was just, to me, the epitome of everything that you want in a Toronto Raptor. Pure and unadulterated passion, that capability to show up when the lights are bright, when you need that little bit of a spark. And obviously, you talked about that dunk in the Indiana series. It's not just that. It's been a number of different occasions in which we have been like dead and buried. I would think the most, even though the dunk is probably the most memorable single moment, to me, that 2017 series against the Milwaukee Bucks, in which we had a 2-0 drop off right off the bat, lost one home game, and then got absolutely smoked in game 3, where we were just getting just absolutely clowned on. They were using the Barney theme song to get the Toronto Raptors in, and it was just a foregone conclusion that the Raptors were going to lose that series. And what did we go ahead and do? In an afternoon game on a game 4, Norman Powell was introduced into the starting lineup as kind of an X factor, and he just went absolutely ham. And he was the difference for us in that series. Shot over 50% from 3, had 25 points in that game as well. And he also had an exclamation dunk in the next home game as well. So it was just one of those things where, you talk about playoff Powell, you talk about Stormin Norman, this idea of when the chips are down, a guy you can rely on. And we just saw that year in, year out. And was it not for Norman Powell's injuries, he would likely have been a much bigger factor as well in our championship run and, in the year after as well. But it's just been, in many ways, a tough situation for him. And you talk about that emotion, you talk about that loyalty that he had, and it was 100% clear. I mean, just that Players Tribune article, you say, puts it into words, and it was no doubt one of those situations where he's saying, look, I wasn't thinking of anything outside of Toronto. I hadn't thought about anyone, any place else. This was home to me. A team in which the guys are counted out, a team in which it's a band of misfits, those second-round undrafted guys who have just banded together and formed a brotherhood, for those who like to watch South Park, a broship that has been formed, and that just couldn't be broken. And I'm going to miss Norm a lot. I think the deal that was done to get us a little bit of bench scoring in Rodney Hood for the rest of the year, but mostly the Gary Trent piece, who is a very similar player in terms of what Norman Powell was. Obviously not as polished, but he's 22. He's got the upside. He's a restricted free agent next year. So from a financial standpoint, it made a lot of sense to do it. I'm okay with it, but just rest assured that Portland has got itself one hell of a player, and he's already made his impact.
Hell of a player. Yeah, man. And it's funny you mentioned, like, you think about all the playoff series and, just how many times he had shown up. But you talk about injuries and whatever else. But again, I've mentioned this numerous times within every single podcast that we do talk about Norman Powell. It's just the evolution of his game, right? And how much he must have worked on it in order to get to this level, right? So understand the grind. He started as a slasher. He was great at the basket, but he wasn't a shooter by any means, right? Mm-hmm. Developmental seasons, 1 season, 2 season goes by, he's still not a good 3-point shooter. Eventually, it all kind of got put together in the last 2 years, especially in the championship year run and the year after, you saw more consistency from him. Now, some of the most iconic memories are in the playoffs, and we understand that, but here at the Swing, and I'm sure all of Toronto, all of Canada, all the Raptors fans, all around the world wish him the best of luck in Portland. A winning franchise, a franchise that absolutely stacked up in this little trade, deadline. Mm-hmm. And, we're excited as Raptors fans to see what happens with, Gary Trent, but also with Rodney Hood. And, today they look very good if anyone was watching the Oklahoma City Thunder game. But
looking good so far at the half. Hopefully break that streak. 67-59 right now at the half. So definitely hoping that we do get to that. But apart from that, obviously we spoke about some of the other little complimentary pieces that went as well. We saw that both Matt Thomas as well as Terrence Davis were traded off respectively to the Utah Jazz and the Sacramento Kings. Unfortunately for Matt Thomas, he was waived right there. Hopefully he gets an opportunity to stick somewhere else, because I do think he has some potential to be able to make it in this league.
Mhm.
But for what the Toronto Raptors were looking in this current window, there's no denying it. This is a retooling time now for the Raptors. We are coming to the end of what was undoubtedly the most successful era of the Toronto Raptors, the entire We the North era, becoming a perennial winner in the regular season, a perennial 50-win team, a perennial playoff contender, and obviously getting to a point where they were able to ascend to the highest of highs and the highest of peaks in a situation where we were able to take advantage of. And every Toronto Raptor fan is always going to remember the championship year run. Every Toronto Raptor fan is always going to have those memories, that feeling, all of that, because regardless of how things go, no one will ever be able to take away that championship from you, and no one will ever be able to take away what I am sure are going to be highlights that are going to be featured for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, just everything that happened with that. And, for these guys that have been a big piece of that, it's obviously going to be a big part of their lives, going to be a big part of our lives as fans. But I also do want to talk about a piece of that era that has remained, and we weren't necessarily expecting that. If anything, Norman Powell was the piece that we're like, okay, this is someone that could potentially be staying on, could potentially be something that, if we don't get a deal that we like, would be something that we keep on for a longer piece. But on the other hand, what was looking like it was a foregone conclusion was that of our captain, our leader, our engine, our booty, Kyle Lowry. But in the end, Masai didn't make the move. Talk about that.
Yeah, man. I mean, ultimately, you think about a guy like Kyle Lowry. He's a little bit on the older end of the spectrum. Doesn't mean he has any less talent. He is playing amazing, and he always does. He's hardworking, whatever else. So we know as Toronto fans what Kyle Lowry brings to the table, and I know a lot of other teams do too, but they just weren't able to show it in the way that they were giving us back sort of offers. And you think about, some of the teams that came into the mix. There was the LA Clippers, but mainly there was two teams, which was the Miami Heat and the
LA
Lakers. Now, actually, Philly as well. I'm going to say Philly. That's more so who I was.
Yeah, Philly. I have a whole different thing to talk about Daryl Morey there. But anyway,
we'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, those three teams are all teams that have this incredible core already, and they're looking to add one more person to make that run, right? Because if you've seen what Brooklyn's done, it's really annoying to be anyone else contending. So with that being said, they were very hesitant to give up some of their future for the now, which I don't understand for the life of me, given the circumstances of how each team is made up. Yeah. Miami could have absolutely used someone like Kyle Lowry, but more importantly, I think the one team that absolutely should have done this in a heartbeat was the Philadelphia Sixers, and they didn't go for it, and it made no sense to me because they need someone like Kyle Lowry to really help organize this team. Even if they are very successful, they're very successful off of their skill, but with that kind of leader and him being a champion, he can definitely give that advice, that wisdom that our guys have been getting over the years for his own home team. And that was kind of annoying to see that the way that was kind of handled. So am I happy as a Toronto fan that Kyle Lowry is still here? I'm absolutely happy. But with the hype that was created with this whole trade deadline, I was kind of disappointed. I'm like, you know what? Maybe we could pick something up off of this. Like, some of the names that were being thrown in, like THT from LA. I would have loved to have a guy like that, honestly. Sure. Tybo and a few round picks from, and then Duncan Robinson or Tyler Harrow. Like, honestly, these are guys that have done absolutely brilliant things within the NBA, or at least can do brilliant things. And, if we're looking for that 2-3 year window, Toronto's a great franchise for people like that to develop, right? Now, it didn't go through. I'm okay with it. What does that mean? Kyle Lowry just stays with us and continues to, mentor these guys and continues to, tweak a little the attitudes that we've been seeing, or at least trying to use his, veteran experience and his life and kind of say, hey, man, this may not have been done the best way. Here's how you can improve, take responsibility, make this a winning franchise again, or something like that, right? So I don't know. How did you feel? There's so much involved in this.
Yeah. Look, I'd made my feelings known prior to it that I didn't think moving Kyle Lowry was the right move to begin with. Norman Powell, I thought, was one of those where, as much as I don't want to move him, it's a situation where if you can get the right kind of assets, the right kind of thing to extend that window, because Norman Powell, you'd have to be paying big bucks in the next year. And even though he deserves it and he absolutely should be getting that, it wouldn't necessarily have fallen in line with where Toronto is looking to be at this moment. On the other hand, a Kyle Lowry, who, first of all, apart from the fact that he is absolutely the greatest Raptor of all time, all that leadership, all of the Godfather mentality that he brings to every guy that's on this roster, that kind of leadership is hard to replace. My only question now becomes, because we had been talking about at the Kyle Lowry trade deadline talk that this deadline was essentially free agency for him, at least in his mind, or I don't know what was discussed. So the question now ends up becoming, does Kyle Lowry staying here mean that we are keeping him for a longer term period? Or does it still mean that once this off season comes, we are going to be, I guess, looking around and seeing what kind of options are potentially available and then deciding whether Kyle is going to be staying or not? So that's obviously still up in the air. And don't forget, apart from Kyle being up in the air, Masai's future himself with the team is also up in the air as far as him deciding to keep a contract or extend him or whatever else ends up happening. So there's a lot of moving parts that are coming into this offseason. And obviously this season itself has been an absolute just wreck. It's been no flow whatsoever, no rhythm whatsoever, COVID protocols, not playing at home. All these things have been stated and stated again, and you can't underplay that kind of effect that it has on a team to not be at their home court, to not be in front of fans, especially a fan base that is very vocal, has one of the best home records in the league. Other teams may potentially be able to get away or even take advantage of something like this, but the Raptors are 100% feeling the brunt of that. So especially for this season, I think having a Kyle Lowry there to help keep my heads cool, help keep everyone on level playing field, on a level emotional ground is incredibly important. And to have that is helpful. That being said, unfortunately, Kyle has a foot infection that's keeping him off for the next 7 to 10 days as well. But going back to this season itself, I mean, we're sitting at 18-29 now. Hopefully, we can at least pull off this win against OKC, so that gets us 10 games below 500. For those who tuned in on the Swings post-game reaction after the last one, I really hope the fact that this next 12-game stretch that started with that Detroit Pistons game and obviously was an incredibly disappointing loss there is essentially the Raptors, to me, last chance to kind of salvage if they want to decide to go one way or the other. You're pretty much facing off against teams that are below 500, teams that are not necessarily at the apex of playoff contention. So in that stretch, up until you go ahead and face the Brooklyn Nets on April 21st, is your opportunity to win 8, 9, 10 games of those to try to get yourself back to that 500. But, it's going to be a tough road ahead. And if Kyle's out, maybe we start seeing the other side of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point you make, that we're facing the schedule's a lot easier in this sort of span of games. But at the same time, I will argue the way I've seen this team play, we play a difficult team and we play great and we still lose. Then we play a really awful team. Mm-hmm. They play great. We don't. We lose, right? The inconsistency is consistent. And it's the most, it is such a frustrating product to watch.
Agreed.
And it comes down to a lot of different things. You can blame it on this, that, whatever. We can say that, we're away from home. We can say that COVID hit us, and all of these I totally agree with. But the way that the team is playing is inexcusable on any front, right? And then it comes down to who wants to take that responsibility, right? Who wants to be that guy to lead them out of it? Kyle has, personally, I don't think Kyle has done a great job this year. And the reason why I say this is because I have seen these guys just deteriorate confidence-wise, everything-wise, relationships with the coaches. Not to say that Kyle was the best leader in that respect anyway, but point is that they're just everybody's frustrated, and that tends to happen when a team starts to lose. So where does this all come from? Let's forget all those other excuses. Let's stick with basketball, right? We know our biggest struggle right now, I'm going to say it's both ends of the court. So honestly, every aspect of the game needs some sort of boosting. One is defense. Our defense is god-awful. It is god-awful. When you lose guys like Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, who protect the paint very well and are defensive IQ legends, okay, that puts so much more pressure on the defense to protect the paint, right? Otherwise, they could leave Marc and Serge inside and not have to worry. Why was our perimeter defense a little bit better last year? Why were we second place? It's because we trust those guys to make sure they can close out at any point inside, and the other guys would just step outside. And that trust was brilliant. It flowed. Now you have them have to overcompensate for the loss of those two guys with guys like Aaron Baines and Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher, I'll be honest with you, I'm on and off with this guy. And the reason why I say that is he is a type of player that I personally feel has no impact to the game. Absolutely no impact, both offensively and defensively. It's like points that don't matter, right? Or defensively, he's getting outboarded, pushed around both by skinny guys and big guys. And so I'm like, okay, he gets like 2 or 3 blocks a game, sure. But overall, in the scheme of things, he's fouling way too much. And that's another problem. Overall, the Toronto Raptors, because of their aggressive way of playing defense, unfortunately run into a lot of foul trouble, which also is just really destructive. Or they'll play fantastic defense, which, I'm going to say like 2 or 3 quarters of the game, they'll play fantastic defense. And then what happens is it breaks down. And why does it break down? A, they're too tired because of the minutes that we're playing, all the starters. But number 2 is also when you start missing shots after just having stretches of shutting down the defense, it gets demoralizing. And so then that brings me to my second point, which is the offense. We are not able to create good offense. Why is that? Freddie has turned into a nightmare on the offensive end. Why? Because he doesn't facilitate the ball the way it should be facilitated as a point guard. He's undersized, and not to mention, like, I'm not trying to say that he's a bad point guard. He has all the tools. He's great at slashing, creating, and this and that. But of recent, because of the struggles, I think he's taken it upon himself to try these hero shots over and over again. So I think you're going to get into this, and I'm sure I think I'm just going to pass it on to you. And that underlying issue on the offensive end is more so shot selection. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And we've seen that shot selection really start to betray us in especially that early to mid third quarter period, which is where we have kind of left lead after lead after lead kind of blow away from us, because we get to a point where, as you've talked about before, we'll play great against the top teams. We're playing up to them, but then in an effort to, blow them out, or in an effort to try and push the lead out there, we start taking these ill-advised threes that are coming out there. And the problem is it's a bit of a catch-22, because we don't have that capability inside at this moment to be able to do that. And on top of that, we're absolutely dead last in the league in rebounding, and we're 20th in the league in offensive rebounding. And the problem is, when you take a lot of threes, the rebounds you get as well are long rebounds, which end up screwing you over going on to the other end. And we get hit with a lot of fast break points, a lot of transition points, and they've been hurting us massively. So this is one of those things where it's 100% a personnel thing. I disagree that Boucher is not a net positive or any of that. And I also think that the Serge Ibaka defensive side of it was overstated. It's not his defense that was actually helping prop us up. It was the fact that he was able to ensure that there wasn't a drop off offensively and also schematically when he would be coming off the bench, which was absolutely his best position. So even though Marc Gasol wasn't necessarily a offensive guy for us, he was able to essentially play around with the starters that were there, be that guy who would always be in the right place at the right time to help ensure that we build a lead, which we did a vast majority of the time with the starters. And then Serge Ibaka was able to come in, be fresh, be essentially better than 95% of the matchups that would be coming up against him. And the best part was, because we kind of had that situation, we were able to essentially have Kyle or Fred play less minutes at the beginning and then have them come back in when Ibaka would be there and take advantage of that pick and roll situation and pick and pops.
Horrible on pick and roll, by the way.
It has gotten to a point where that has kind of been taken away from us. So we're essentially relying on our 3-point shot to get us there. And to our credit, we're still number 3 in the league in 3 points made, number 9 in the league in 3-point percentage. So it's definitely a key strength for us. The problem is the other weaknesses have now overshadowed that strength. And then when that becomes your only thing, it becomes predictable on the offensive end. So that's where you get into that situation where Fred is taking these moon shots from 30 feet out, 40 feet out, where they may not be the most advised. But the problem is there's not enough creativity going on otherwise, from whether it be a personnel standpoint or whether it just be straight up our offensive execution. Something's got to give.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's funny that you bring up pick and roll, and that's another underlying theme, because that goes on both ends of the court. So on the offensive end, you would have hoped with a guy like Aaron Baines, the pick and roll would work a little bit better. But you notice that even if Aaron Baines' screens are great, there's not really any consistency with how the rolling goes, right?
Sure.
And the benefit of having a Marc Gasol, which people shit on him in the entirety of last season, I can understand why, but you have to understand Marc Gasol is also an elite playmaker. Okay, so he can set people up from the post, which we do not have anyone who can do that, right? So you would often see either Marc starting at the 3-point line, looking for somebody to cut or whatever, and his passes were so butter, or he'd set up in the post and wait for somebody to cut. And often, I've seen Norm do that a lot. So anyway, offensively, we do not have that. And I hate it because I personally think, Malachi Flynn, we talked about how his dad commented that he's a pick and roll sort of point guard. And actually, even in today's game, I have been noticing he has the tendencies to play to that pick and roll, because you see that screen come, he cuts in off of that screen and he's waiting for someone to cut in with him. Baines is not there. Boucher is not there. Nobody's there. Whoever sets the screen steps out to the 3-point line, which is unfortunately the game that we're trying to play. And it sucks because I personally think a guy like Pascal put him into the same situation as they had maybe a Serge Ibaka, where they play that pick and roll, because Pascal has a great floater. He has a fantastic floater. So if they play that pick and roll with him and they use a floater to their advantage, because he can get over most of the guys, right? I think that would be great. Now on the defensive end, if there was a stat to say the worst pick and roll defense, it literally reminds me of the 2014, was it? The 2014 Raptors when we got swept by the Wizards. Literally.
2014-15, yeah.
2014, 2015, where John Wall and Gobert, it wasn't Gobert, sorry, not Gobert, Gortat trapped on us with a pick and roll. And it's the same situation here. We suck at pick and roll defense because we just don't know what's happening, like how we can defend it, because we're undersized a lot of the time. And secondly is when we actually play good defense on the pick and roll, somehow the team gets it out to the 3-point line. And then we get crapped on at the 3-point line. There's been so many games where bad shooting teams have been shooting lights out against us on the 3-point line, and good shooting teams have been killing us on the 3-point line. So here's my thing. You shoot well on the 3-point line, that's great for us. The other team's shooting just as well. So it's not balancing, it's balancing it out. It's cutting off any sort of advantage you have there.
Yeah.
So that's the tough part. And it's especially annoying when it happens in that same third quarter. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about that third quarter that just makes us like lose our brain.
And I think it's interesting that you talk about the pick and roll, especially because that roll man is just so incredibly important. And we talked about, that Serge Ibaka factor on that being an incredibly good pick and roll player who is able to either get a spot and pop or get a spot and go. But this year, the eye test tells it, but the numbers are telling it just as much. We are literally dead last in the league, right, in terms of field goal percentage for the man who's rolling. You want to guess what our field goal percentage is on our pick and rolls?
I'm going to guess, and this is an honest guess. It's probably around like 18% to 22%.
Okay. It's not that bad, but it's 42.3%, which is a whole 4% worse than the second worst pick and roll team in the league, which would be the Portland Trailblazers. And even they're shooting 47% at that. So it's absolutely insane that, for the team that's the best pick and roll team in the league, which is the Miami Heat, they average 63% for the pick and roll man scoring on the pick and roll, while the Raptors are sitting at 42.3. And it's just absolutely insane. And the other part is we're also not getting free throws in our situations where we're coming out of that, where our free throw percentage as well is barely in that average 13% of our pick and rolls resulting in free throws. So it's just, I said, that rim attacking presence is just not there. And, Pascal Siakam, a lot of that is going to have to be the next level of evolution for him, because he's shown, you talk about that guy who is able to create, his ability to get those dimes, to get those dishes is going up, but the vast majority of his dishes are essentially driving kicks. Yeah. Or if he's in the boat, to get that guy into the corner, which is great. It's an important play, but where you get to that next level of creativity and that next level to keep that defense off kilter is going to be that capability to exploit the pick and roll, either to be that guy to, do a handoff, quickly set a screen and dive to the basket, or to be just that pick and roll man who starts to help create that with Kyle Lowry, with Fred VanVleet, and kind of build that side of it as well. Because, to me, that's actually a very natural thing for Pascal to do, because the vast majority of his career, he's been known as this guy who takes outlet passes and just dives to the basket. And this is at like 94 feet and he's running to the basket. Yeah. Why is this not happening in the half court? Why is this not happening with Boucher in the half court? And some of that kind of falls on Nick Nurse as well, where, these are things that you need to be able to do and be able to exploit to get the best out of your offense. Because if you're just relying on your three-point shot to win you games, you'll win 30-40% of your games doing that. On nights where you get hot, you could go ahead and beat anyone. But if you want that consistent success, again, as we've had, you need to be able to go ahead and add that little wrinkle to your game. And it's definitely lacking at the moment.
Yeah, it has to come from everywhere, man. It has to come from wherever. Look, winning is not just about who shoots the most threes all the time. It comes down to so many different factors. It could be like, okay, when you're not hot on the 3-point line, where are you going to get your offense from? Where is it going to be generated from, right? And I like that you say that, Pascal has the moves to get there, like the slashing aspect of it off of the pick and roll. He did it a lot, or even 90 feet away or whatever the situation is. He used to just attack. And that attack mentality, I think, is great when it's used in bursts, right? But unfortunately for Pascal, I can understand why he's not trying to do that as much, is because he gets tired, man. Like, what do you want the guy to do, right? You look at the Toronto Raptors, they're playing extended minutes, playing defense, which is all about hustle, by the way, against mostly oversized guys. Usually on every given night, you're getting bullied there, right? So these guys have to conserve their energy somewhere, and that's showing in the way that they're playing on the offensive end, right? So it's a really tough situation for all of the Raptors right now. So having Pascal, but we've seen games. There was, I think, 1 or 2 games ago, we saw Pascal play a fantastic game where he was super aggressive, right in the post, went right at everybody. And that's the kind of thing that we want to see from him, right? Instead of him pushing out to the 3-point line all the time, right? But in order to do so, you have to understand there needs to be a second option for the Toronto Raptors in terms of the bigs. Boucher is not that guy. I'm sorry. As much as
at least not yet, but it's one of those where, look, Boucher has taken steps this season. I think you're underrating how much Boucher has evolved this year. Apart from
Boucher
the fact that
is the same guy.
No.
Boucher is the same guy he was a year ago
Disagree.
But he's getting more minutes. That's the only difference.
That's not that first and foremost. These are one of those things where you just think someone will just live up to their per 36, where it's like, hey, if he's doing it in 12 minutes, he should be able to do it in 25, 26 minutes. That vast majority of the time does not translate. But for
how hard is his job?
It has.
Explain to me, how hard is his job in this situation?
No, it is. No, look, even just, okay, let's go back to an old Toronto Raptors perspective, right?
Okay.
A guy who always used to be this per 36 guy. You recall Ed Davis back when we used to have him, right? Ed Davis, when he first came, was projected to be one of the best bigs in the league in the sense of his per 36, where it's like, hey, in his 12 to 15 minutes that this guy would play, he had just a ridiculous motor. He had an incredible rebounding rate, and he had an incredible touch around the rim. But it didn't translate to extended minutes. We tried. There were so many opportunities where we were trying to get Ed Davis to play 30 minutes a game alongside Amir Johnson and go ahead and have that develop. But it doesn't always work out. In fact, vast majority of the time, it doesn't work out when you take these bench guys who are able to play energy minutes and then put them into a role where there's more required of them. And don't forget, this is Boucher on an absolute bargain contract as well, that you have gone ahead and turned into a legitimate rotation guy for you. That is a huge win, not only for Boucher, but for the Toronto Raptors. But
for sure. Here's where sorry, go ahead. Finish what you were going to say.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get at is you have this rare unicorn situation in which a guy who has gone ahead and taken that opportunity and ran with it as far as his productivity is concerned. Now, if we're talking about, him becoming like an Embiid or something, or like these are not things that you're asking him to be.
That. Of course.
For what we need Boucher to do, I think Boucher is doing it just fine. The idea is that I think there's far too much expectation being put on him because of the fact that the rest of our bench has been absolute non-factors this year, and he is then, as a result, essentially asked to do kind of outside of his skin. It's being asked to do
100%. Look, I am agreeing with you 1,000,000% right there. But I'm saying in terms of skill level and how much like he can really develop. If he wants to develop into that, into someone who can do more, it's going to have to come through size. It's never going to come through that finesse anymore. I'm sorry. It's not going to work. So even if he's averaging, like, let's say 25 points from this and that, like he's still getting
averaging 25, we'd be having a different.
He's not averaging 25, but like you're expecting him to become something amazing, right?
I'm expecting him to be a guy who is able to stretch the floor in the way a modern big does, while also having that capability. Essentially, you're looking for 3-and-D guys in this league. And as I said in the previous podcast, he could be, in my mind, what Robert Covington is for the Portland Trail Blazers. That idea of being able to stretch it out, being able to essentially be that defensive factor, but not only on the blocks, but on the open floor.
In spurts, sure. I'm not giving this guy more than 20 minutes any game. And the reason why I say that is, look, unless he can become more disciplined on the defense, and I get it. When you put it into perspective like that, it makes a lot of sense why his job is a little bit more difficult than I would have imagined, right? And that is because he's pretty much given the responsibility of guarding all the bigs, getting the rebounds, and still scoring, right? Pretty much do everything. I get that. But in terms of his development, I really don't see him, especially on the defensive end, unless he can become a lot more mature in the way that he fouls in the most ridiculous ways. To me, he's jump friendly.
Agreed.
He's foul handsy friendly, and a lot of the problems that we've created, it could be one of two things. It could be he's just that easy to, bite. As an offensive player, he's a guy that you could eat on because he can bite so much, right? But it could also be because of the stress of trying to contain everyone in the front court of the other team. I can understand, or he could just be tired, so he has to foul, right? Because I come back to this every time. Look at the minutes all of these guys are playing, and then see if that's sustainable defensively through the course of a game. It's absolutely not. These guys are literally panting at the free throw line every single game. And it's absolutely destructive because we're talking about longevity, right? And that's a scary thing. You talk about OG, you talk about Pascal, you talk about Freddie, 3 guys who thankfully, apart from OG, have been pretty healthy. Okay. But even Boucher, but if you continuously put stress on that body is going to give out at some point. Freddie has had back issues before, and it's something that probably still bothers him, shoulder and back. Pascal has groin issues, right? And you have OG, who's had knee surgery before, right? And has had a calf issue over time. So ultimately, it all just comes down to Nick Nurse, Masai, and all these other guys to figure out, like, hey, what do we want from this season this year? Because in the situation that they're in right now, if they don't tank and they kind of stay like in the middle, they're not getting a pick out of this. Okay. Nor are they getting a playoff spot. So like, what's the plan here? You know what I mean? I think there needs to be a little bit more openness with that.
I mean, okay, you're a GM. You're not going to come out and be all that.
Of course not. But like, at least we want to know from the perspective of, you will be able to tell from the perspective of the players. Sure. You know what I mean? What the situation is. And hey, man, like, just don't be in the middle. Pick your choose.
Of course. No one ever wants to be in a treadmill. But like I've said, I don't think this core, first of all, is a treadmill core, because we've already seen the capabilities of what they have. Obviously, certain things help unlock that further. And I just think what we have for so many years in this era enjoyed, which is a depth of roster, this is the first year, I'd say, in which we really are struggling on depth. And we've talked about it again and again and again. We pretty much have 5, maybe 6 guys that we can rely on consistently to be able to play minutes for us. And that leads exactly into what you're saying in terms of overextending guys as a result of that, because they have no other choice. We saw Fred VanVleet last game clutching his knee because of a situation where he landed awkwardly and was really forced to kind of do this much more to try to just keep you in the game, because the rest of the guys aren't doing it, which is why now I'm hoping Rodney Hood can help us a little bit with that. There's still buyout stuff that's to happen. I still think for the rest of this season, you don't have to just be like, oh, I'm on the tank now, but you have situations in which you need to either decide that, hey, if I'm not going to give my starters the support they need to be able to consistently not only take care of their health, but also win, then you need to make that personnel decision, be like, okay, look, then that means we're going to start playing these other guys more to be able to do that. So that's where it just ends up coming down. That's a decision that's going to likely be made pretty quickly over the next couple of weeks, because as I said, that this period leading into April 21st is by and large their last real chance of either making it to a playoff spot or kind of deciding the other way around. So
yeah, and
I think that's where we should go.
It is tough. Like both HK and I and everybody else, we're really just
win, man.
We want to win. We're just baffled. We're like, we didn't expect it to be as bad as it is. We really didn't. And but when you look at the type of players that we have, especially on the bench, we kind of realize we just, as Raptors fans, maybe because we weren't as educated on how these guys play, maybe we probably expected them to fit in and just do the same in terms of production.
I think we always saw that there was a depth problem very early on from the beginning, right? And especially
we still were like, Baines is a great.
I was like, once you pretty much saw that the Aaron Baines situation, especially, like, it was one of those where we obviously hoped that we would have kept Ibaka. I think that was definitely one of those things that hurt us, because we didn't really have a plan, at least clearly now, that went ahead and essentially replaced what that offered us, whether it be from pure hype, whether it be from bench production, or whether it be from that big man that you need to be able to keep yourself competitive on the boards, because you can defend as well as possible, but when you're getting destroyed on second chance points because everyone on your floor is 6'8" and below, you're gonna have those struggles. And I put some of that on Masai, I put some of that on the personnel that's there not living up to what they should be doing. But in the end, the results are there in front of you, and this has been, without a doubt, the worst Toronto Raptors season in the last 7-8 years. So definitely got to do what we can to salvage it. But if not, the offseason is going to be incredibly, incredibly important for us, more so than I'd say any offseason in the last 5-6 years.
My dude, is it this season, offseason, that all those free agents are listed, or is it the next season?
I mean, there were a lot of free agents that were listed this year, but obviously a lot of them have signed on extensions and all of that. But next year after that is where you're seeing, at least on paper, a lot of these free agents available.
Absolutely. And I think that's where you want to try to build up to, right? That's where you want to try to build up to see if you can eventually, steal somebody from that, free agency class or whatever you want to call it. But that list. But apart from that, like from the Toronto Raptors management and everything like that, honestly, I want to also make mention of one important thing that I don't think most people would kind of see. And we're kind of discrediting this a lot. It's that the way that the facilities are set up, especially for practice, right? It is really difficult, especially when COVID hits you, to actually get some practice runs in. So a lot of the time, it's really just a personal shoot around for these guys. And that's why a lot of chemistry issues you also see on the court with the Toronto Raptors, whether it be on the defensive end or the offensive end, because you're not really getting scrimmage time either, right? And you can see it's affected the way they've played because, that's just how it is. And I'm not trying to make that an excuse, but it's something to think of when you talk about how, the team hasn't developed in the way that they have and why Baines isn't as integrated into the system as we would have liked and this and that. But anyway, the future. I mean, I think that's what we want to see. And for the present, it's to really understand the positives. And I think we can probably end off with this is like, what are some of the positives that you've seen in the course of this season as a Raptors fan? Sure.
And look, we already touched upon the fact that Chris Boucher, at least to me, has made tremendous strides in terms of what from a financial perspective, what his contract means and the production he's offering, but just also from himself, getting that opportunity for extended minutes, getting that opportunity to showcase more. And to my mind, he has gone ahead and done that. So for what we need from him, he's been a definite positive. Fred VanVleet, by and large on the season, has absolutely been a positive. You've got a situation where he signed a big contract coming in. Obviously, that brings with it expectations. That brings with it scenarios in which you start now looking at him in a different light. And 54-point game aside, just all these, everything else aside, it's just one of those where Fred has stayed that same icy cool customer, stayed that same, steady Freddie that we expect him to be. And, as far as our overall starting core of these guys are concerned, I think that's something that has been a definite positive. And then finally, and I think this has been outside of Norm, who I think was our best player, and we already spoke about him, OG Anunoby. OG, to me, I've already spoken so incredibly highly of what I consider potentially, one of, in my mind, the best defensive perimeter guys that are out there in the league today. Doesn't get enough credit for what he does, but for all those games that we've had even earlier in the season where we kind of became like a running joke that whoever's the lead guard on the other team is going to get shut down, whether it be Steph Curry, whether it be Dame, they will have games that is below what they expect their par to be. And that happens apart from Fred and these guys doing that. It's OG. Is willing to take on that challenge, always willing to take on the guy in late game situations, all of these. And he is just such an incredibly defensively sound, defensively high IQ player that the fact that his offense is developing to the level that it is now is just an incredibly added bonus. But I just have so much praise and so much upside in what OG can do. And I'm really excited to see that continue to develop. Absolutely, man. And I feel much the same way. I think the biggest positive out of this season for me has been OG. And, it's really just come from these really amazing, the confidence he has with his three ball is fantastic to see. And so he's hitting pretty high numbers with that. And then defensively, he's so versatile with it because you can pretty much guard any position. Like the 5's a little bit tough for him, but
you can see how built he is, that frame of his. And he's just very smart on the defensive end. And every time he's on the court, it's like, I'm very, very pleased, like just to kind of see how he plays, where he's on the court. And he's also developed a little bit of a mid-range. Like he's trying that this year, which I really, really appreciate. And, you know, you've seen a little bit more of his dribbles and some really tough creative finishes at the free throw line, or just like while he's, cutting or slashing on the glass. So it's like, that's why I have his jersey up here. So I don't know if you guys can see right now because of the shadow, but essentially every Raptor that I feel like deserves to be up here. I mean, mind you, I don't have every wall of jersey, but that's where they go. So we had Norm on there for a long time and he got traded, but I felt like OG had become the best player on the Toronto Raptors at that particular time. And that's why his jersey's up there. And apart from that, I do think that apart from, OG, I feel like Pascal, people might disagree with me, and sometimes I will disagree with myself, given the way he plays.
We're going to start about your polarization towards my boy Pascal.
Yeah, but what I will say is that I have seen the pieces. Like I have seen all the raw pieces of the way that his footwork is working, the way he's used, challenging some of the defenders on the offensive end. I really have seen some incredible things and some not so incredible things. But over time, with reps, it'll get there. It'll definitely get there. And I want to see him continue to be fearless. As much as people will continuously give him crap. If he's doing great, no one will say a thing. They'll praise him. But when he's doing bad, people will still crap on you. If you're doing decent, they'll still crap on you. At the end of the day, my friend, and this is what I'm saying to Pascal and the Toronto Raptors fans, is like, look, he is definitely a guy that, is brave. Why do I say he's brave? Is because you've seen the course of the season. You've seen what's happened, the adversity we all had to go through. He played like crap at the beginning, at the bubble. He has something to prove. But has he shied away from any of this? Has he shied away from the criticism? Has he shied away from that last shot of the game, despite it just bouncing out every single time? He hasn't. And that's something that a lot of guys don't have in this league. And this is a reality. People, if they miss once or twice, they're going to be like, I don't want that shot no more. I don't want that. Give that to somebody else. Give that responsibility to someone else. So even if we've paid him that big bucks and you don't feel like he's, living up to that contract, just know we have a guy over here who's absolutely fearless. And when it comes down to the last possession, no matter what, even if it's a trash possession, he's going to try to make something of it. If it goes in, it goes in. If it doesn't go in, it's okay. You'll be frustrated. We move on. And that's something that I absolutely appreciate about Pascal. And just wait till next season when everything, I hope comes back to Toronto and the teams can practice with each other. And, we add people on the off season to really build this roster to what its potential could be in the current moments. You will see some fantastic things from everybody. And so just wait for that. Not to say that you won't see fantastic things this season. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Right?
Hey, man. Look, in the end, we're all here to watch the best of what we can do and keeping one eye on the future as well. Much like the swing, we keep on what's going on with today, but always with one eye on tomorrow. And speaking of one eye on tomorrow, our next episode will be Friday evening. We'll go back to our regular 8 p.m. end time to be able to once again break down what is happening in the NBA world, what are the big stories, and just keep tuning in with us. This is your boy HK. That is, as always, that guy Owais, and we will see you on the next episode. Peace.
Lillard, long range three. Let's go. Defended by Simmons.